Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. Secure Talk is brought to you by adaQuest, your cybersecurity and compliance partner. My name is Mark Schreider, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we are being joined by the CEO of adaQuest, Hiram Machado. Hiram is going to talk to us about, or give us some ideas in terms of how an organization can get started on the path to improving their cybersecurity posture. Hiram, how are you doing today?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great.
That's good to hear. We get a lot of questions about, what is the first thing we can do to start improving our cybersecurity, our security posture, or, what can we do to spot potential issues? And, people give all kinds of advice like, well, maybe you should get a pen test or get an assessment done or, do a network scan. And, what approach would you recommend in terms of, well, it could be somebody who's new in the role as a CISO or anybody who they're coming in and they're like, where are we at in terms of our cybersecurity posture? What approaches would you advise?
Yeah, I think that uh, what you just mentioned, where are we at, is the right question to answer, right? And not every IT organization has that answer in their fingertip, right? The IT infrastructure, they grow organically in many organizations. Some organizations started very small, they keep growing and growing, and they keep adding services and infrastructure to the already existing IT infrastructure. And sometimes it gets off hand, right? Sometimes it just grow to a point where you have people who comes and who leave the organization. You may set up a server somewhere, and eventually that server is no longer being used, but whomever set it up left the organization. Now we have a server there sitting there that not a lot of people have awareness of. So it is definitely important to have some level of assessment that gives you the information about, right? Perhaps more accurate information about where we stand, where we are. So a network assessment, right? An IT network assessment, probably a place to start, right? I would not recommend necessarily a pen test from the get-go. It's probably to understand the assets that you have, what kind of assets, where they are. I had a customer once, for example, that we found out that there was a 2003 FTP server hanging there that nobody had awareness it was there, right? With no software installed, and it was just there in a room, and it was still active
So
and connected to the network.
what's the danger of that?
Well, first of all, it's out of sight, right? And being out of sight, you don't, you're not properly maintaining it. So you're probably, in that case, for example, of course, it was a 2003 version, didn't have the latest security patches. In fact, 2003 is no longer even supported. So it's definitely
Highly vulnerable for exploitation.
very vulnerable,
Yeah.
extremely vulnerable, right? In fact, in that particular example, any hacker could easily break through that server because it was not maintained.
Right. So you want to do some type of network scan to identify all the infrastructure you have, all the different types of devices, and then spot or flag potential devices that are potentially out of service or aren't being used, aren't being utilized. Because obviously there's a security issue there. There's also a cost of ownership that goes along with that as well, right? I mean, you have a device that's not being used.
Absolutely. The cost of ownership, the cost of the potential cost of a security breach that can happen. But when we're looking at the network scanning, we're not looking at only at workstations and servers. We're also looking at the status of your AD, right? Your Active Directory. How is our Active Directory? How is the last password reset? Policies in place, right? We look at last time that anybody reset a password compared to the last time an account did a login in the system. So in many cases, I shall say in most cases that we do a network assessment, we do find, I have seen last password reset as back as in 2005 2004, 2005. So a user is using the same password, username and password for the last 15 years. So there's a very good chance that that user used the same email, the same password someplace else, right? Just to log in on a website somewhere in the world, just to create a credential somewhere in the world, and extremely vulnerable to identity, theft and an attack via identity theft.
Can you, by doing some type of network scan or infrastructure scan, can you also get an idea of, the different apps that a company or individuals in the company are using?
That's in any network scan. That should be definitely a one aspect of what you need to look at. You have applications both on the web, right? That might be utilized by some of the employees in that organization without knowledge. One example company, they had this was a scanning for a very large organization. They have about 100,000 employees, and the scanning showed that there were about more than 1,500 applications being used that IT did not have any knowledge of, right? There were just applications that users decide to install in their devices. Maybe you have a CRM in your company, and there are hundreds of CRM tools out there that you can download, you can install it, you enter your credentials, and now that application is accessing your data, right? But without IT governance, without having an IT eye into that application, we don't know if that application, even if it's legit to start with, if it's legitimate, is it built with security awareness in mind, and is it leaking information? Is it a vector, of potential entry in your organization? So getting governance over application management is extremely important. So absolutely an inventory of what are the applications in your system, which ones we have vetted, which ones we have not. Often you find a lot of overlap in terms of applications being used for the same purpose. You might want to consider a standardization of one or another application. Those are the considerations to look at. And having that inventory is the first step towards better governance over application management in your organization.
And what about IoT devices and BYOD devices? Does a network scan help you identify potential issues there as well?
Great question. Absolutely. IoT is a big concern today, right? I don't know if you know that, Mark, but most the challenge with the IoT is that those are single-purpose devices, right? Compared to a multi-purpose device such as a laptop or even a phone, right? And often those single-purpose devices, they don't have the same computer power or storage space, right, as the multi-purpose device that we are used to, right? So they're often very limited to the ability of making sure that they are secure, there is no leak or something or a more serious problem. So there is definitely that is something else that we want to look at. What kind of not only what kind of devices, right, are connecting to your network, so you can make the right decision and put the right mechanism in place for protecting and defending yourself against those devices that could potentially be an issue, given that they don't have the same capability of defense as a laptop, or the same mechanism as a laptop, for example.
I mean, I can imagine stepping into a role as a CISO or CIO of a large organization, and from the CEO down and the board of directors, everybody's saying, remember, cybersecurity is top priority. Information security is top priority. Compliance is top priority, and you've got to figure out, okay, yes, I got that, but what do we have? What are our vulnerabilities? How do we start to develop a roadmap? And if you don't have this type of snapshot that you can get from the network scan that you just described, it'd be incredibly tough to kind of pull all this together. I mean, can you imagine going to your infrastructure people and saying, "I need a schematic of all of our devices, and I need, and I need to know in service, out of service, et cetera, et cetera." That's one challenge. But then another challenge, if you're in that role, is to come up with recommendations that aren't too prohibitively expensive. Because in most organizations, security is kind of considered just an expense, right? It's not perceived as an investment in business operations that's going to return a potential ROI. That's changing, but in most organizations. So in that role, you still need to oftentimes justify your recommendations. And I've seen some of the reports that adaQuest has pulled together where you can scan a network and basically catalog all the devices, flag any devices or any out of date passwords or any unserviced apps or non-sanctioned apps, and some of the IoT devices that may have issues as well. But you're also able to make recommendations that justify themselves because they oftentimes are able to reduce the total cost of ownership. So tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yes, and that is a fantastic question because I think the other component that we need to consider, and we are discussing here this snapshot of where we are today, right? How important that is, understand where we are today. But that's going to be relevant and extremely relevant once, if you also understand where you want to go, right? So I have my starting point and what's my end game, right? Where do I want to go? So one, having that vision and understanding of, what do I want to achieve is very important. With the understanding of that you can't make that happen overnight, right? You're going to have to work for it. And more often than not, most organizations cannot absorb too many projects at the same time, right? Too many moves at the same time, right? So a snapshot of the current situation will often lead to, okay, I have identified so many areas that we can improve, and that if you make a move in that area, if you make an adjustment in that area, if you make a modernization of an application or a device in that area, that will get us closer to that destination that we have a vision to get closer to, right? It's great. But with those two things together, now we can start to put that in a time frame, right? Okay, so what would be an approximate budget for each one of those initiatives that I can potentially do and work on to improve our security posture, right? And let me put that in a timeline kind of view and see how much budget do I need, how much time do I need, with a mindset that this is going to be a journey, right?
That's all right, Hiram. We can just keep talking because everybody's working from home these days and there's a lot of background noise, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why my phone is just Siri. My phone is just asking questions. But anyway, so now we have that destination view, and you have now the path. Now I look at it and say, okay, now how can we consume this? In my organization, how fast can we go? Right? How much can we do at a time? Do I have the right expertise for each one of these initiatives that are potential for us? And you go from there. So that's I think the two aspects that's very important. Before you have the roadmap is what's my, the snapshot of where I am and the vision of where I want to go.
So what's involved in terms of doing a network scan? I mean, I'm not asking you to identify any specific software because I think you use a variety of tools depending on the customer situation, their size,
Yes.
where they're at. Are they on-prem? Are they hybrid? Are they cloud? Et cetera. But basically, what's involved, regardless of the tool that's used, but in terms of time and effort from the customer, what's needed?
Yeah. Well, I would say that a total snapshot would take at least 3 to 4 weeks to turn around. Okay, we are talking about setting up some scanning tool that will, scan through your network and collect all of that data. Usually do that in a machine, domain join machine. You do set up the scanning tool, and it starts to go and ping the different services that you have in your organization and collect the data. One of the reasons why we recommend a 2 to 3 weeks, no, I would say 3 to 4 weeks turnaround is because part of the information that we are trying to collect is related to databases, right? We want to know how many IOs, right, input and output from each database you have on average for a period of time. We want to know how much the CPU, right, of your servers and RAM memory of your servers are being utilized in a period of time. So we usually a collection of that data for a couple of weeks to 3 weeks is the right amount for us to get a good sense of the average, right? I don't want a snapshot of that information in a day because I may, get that information from a peak day, right? When you're utilizing it too much, or getting information from a day that, the service not, being used too much. So you want to average out that kind of information. We call it ARC data, actual resource consumption data, right? So we look at the ARC data for a period of a couple of weeks, 2, 3 weeks. And then from there is quite a bit of work to consolidate a report. It's a lot of raw data that we collect. So analyze that, get the right information out of it, right? So we can present both tactfully to the team in terms of, this is what you can actually do to improve, right? Your security posture, or this is what it might take to migrate this service to the cloud. This is an idea, and with that information, you can provide an idea of what's your cost today, right, to run these operations, and what would be your cost should you go to a cloud environment, if that's interesting for you. So we can do those comparisons. But most interesting is that we do those comparisons, not doing a one-to-one parallel of the infrastructure that you have on-premise with that same infrastructure on the cloud. Usually, that infrastructure on the cloud will be cost prohibitive, right? However, most organizations are underutilizing their current, data centers, right? They have more capacity than what they are actually utilizing. That's very common.
Because they're building capacity to handle peak requirements, but peak might be 1 out of 10 days, once a month, but they need it there just in case. But with the cloud, you can scale as you
can scale up and down,
yeah,
right, as needed. So now we can optimize the utilization, and then do some calculations that shows what would be the cost of ownership on the cloud with an optimized environment that will not suffer from any of the, you have the same performance, will not suffer from a performance perspective, but will perform the same way, but will cost a lot less, and potentially, and most likely, be easier to maintain and manage, right? It does require knowledge of managing a system in the cloud as opposed to doing a system on-premise, but it's definitely not more complex. It's the opposite. It should be easier to manage and maintain. So we do that, the scanning. We also usually use some other tools to look in some areas of vulnerabilities. We look at some cybersecurity areas, and with a consolidated report, with that X-ray, I call it, right, of your network now, and having the vision of where to go. Now let's build a plan.
Excellent. It sounds like a very valuable report. It also sounds like it might be somewhat in effort intensive. For your customers, what's required?
Yeah, not a whole lot, right? What we do is with a domain join machine, some of our specialists will just work through pointing right that machine to the right services. From the customer perspective, what we need is the global admin usually that will help entering the right credentials for the right services, so the information can be collected. We don't get those credentials. We don't see those credentials. All stays there. But the global admin will, have to give us, some time. And during that period of 2 to 3 weeks, we may need his assistance, for a couple of hours a week to fine tune a service or point to a new, a new database that we identified, but we couldn't get to and get the right credentials and those kind of things. And then after that is on us to produce a report and usually spend 2 to sometimes 3 to 4 hours with the executive team presenting the results. So it's not it's not labor intense for the customer.
How about
at all.
How about costs? It sounds like this would be a very valuable piece of information to have. What's it going to cost me?
Yes, that's a very good question. Of course, it depends on the complexity, right, of your of your network, right. I would say if you want to think about the low end, right, of cost, it could be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000, not terribly expensive, but it could be I would say the neighborhood of 30,000 for a more robust and complex infrastructure. So it probably fall somewhere in between most customers.
And I think that I heard you once say that in most cases the customers are able to save the cost of the report based upon following the recommendations, because they're reducing total cost of ownership or eliminating potential security issues, etc. Right?
Well, the result is like I said, security is a journey, right? And compliance. So there will be a lot of low-hanging fruits, right? Mm-hmm. That you probably can act on right away, and in that case, it will you see the result right away, and almost always the benefit outweigh the cost right away, right? And then more, right, as you progress through the different initiatives that may have been identified to work on.
You'd mentioned earlier that you'd come across some interesting things like passwords that hadn't been reset since like 2005, for example. What are some of the other interesting things that you've come across?
Yeah, well, all kind of things. One of the last ones that we did, we were all amazed. The customer and us were all amazed with the number of Excel files throughout the network named passwords.
Oh my gosh! Perfect. It almost sounds like a honeypot type exercise where they were just baiting people to come after this stuff. But
I did. At some point, we were like, "Are they trying to trick us here?" Like that. Do we want to know? Do they want to know if we really find this? But we find that very common, right? What we call shadow IT, right? Mm-hmm. Often the customers get surprised with the amount of applications being used and installed in their machines that they don't have awareness of. It's very often to find, for them to realize how behind the patches, security patches there are in the servers. It's very hard to keep up with, and more often than not, they get surprised with the fact that some of the servers were not patched. And one interesting example, I think I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, the FTP server that was forgotten, right? What happened was that they flipped a room, right, in that particular customer where that FTP server was sitting one day, and they flipped the room to do something else with that room. But when they were flipping the room, nobody knew what to do with that server and what that was for. And they just put the server in a kind of, kept it inside a closet kind of place, right? And kind of flipped the room. And they were using the room for something else now. And nobody ever knew there was a server there, right?
Wow.
So when we point out that there is a server there, we start to trace the server, try to find it. It was inside a closet in a room that used to be an IT room a long time ago, and was no longer an IT room. And the server, one day somebody decided to just keep it in the corner there, and that it was, right, a very old server still running there, and nobody was aware of. So that's some of the things that we find. Not to count the password reset is usually shocking for people to see how how back it goes, without resetting passwords, and also the passwords are, most clients have the passwords set to never expire passwords. So that's another point that we make. Set it to expire at some point, and that will force users to reset. But most organizations, have some legacy systems or never really put that in place.
It's all interesting and I think educational findings there. Hey, Hiram, I have to apologize because well, first off, thank you for sharing the information about the network scans, and I think that it's obviously very clear that any organization needs to have a baseline understanding of where they're at and what they have, what potential issues there are, and opportunities to reduce TCO, or total cost of ownership, as well. And doing one of these type of network scans would be clearly a logical choice to start with. But I have to apologize because usually when I start off a podcast, I start off with some small talk and chit chat, and we didn't really get into that. So let's go to that now. All right. So tell me, it's been a while since we've had you on Secure Talk. It's been well over, I guess, a year. What's been going on with adaQuest recently?
Thank you for asking. Well, quite a bit, right? We have launched our branch in Brazil, right? And we are definitely growing market share in Brazil. Our CSP program with licenses, both in US and Brazil, have been going strong and grow. So we're helping more customers with acquisition of their licenses as well. And there is a new program that they call it Fast Track with Microsoft, that we support customers, Microsoft customers that have more than 150 licenses. We can often provide them some level of support for deployment at no cost to them. So that's been an interesting service that we have been got the credentials to support these customers, and now that's been a very successful program that we are running in the organization, and
excellent.
work with more customers.
It seems like every day that the company's adding new people and adding new customers. What's in terms of? Most of the work that adaQuest does is in the Microsoft ecosystem. Most of it, not all of it, but most of it's there. What exciting things do you see happening with Microsoft?
Well, the interesting thing is, I think, how the focus that Microsoft has put around security and compliance. I think that is a trend in the world of in the need, actually, of developing more regulations, if you will, around the treatment of data, right? So you see that with the GDPR kind of being the most famous regulation that we most people might recognize in Europe, right? But that need is legitimate, right? We have our data out there, right? Our data is more exposed than ever digitally, right? Mm-hmm. So there has to be some level of of regulation that gives us users, right, the confidence that we can go ahead and give that our information to somebody, and know that proper care, right, will be in place, right? for the data, for our personal data, for our personal information. So I do, I know it can be a pain, but I do appreciate, right, the fact that there is something being done about it, about the regulation. And I think when you ask about Microsoft, I think they outstand compared to many others when it comes to their level of commitment to provide the right capabilities, right, and controls to help organizations to comply with those regulations. Should they be GDPR, HIPAA, or just a framework of reference such as NIST or COBIT or something else. So I really appreciate and enjoy helping organizations getting closer to compliance, right? Compliance is also a journey with those regulations, and also seeing through that compliance, we see that the systems are indeed more secure and robust, right? And we are preventing people from attack, from being a victim of attacks. Just to give you some idea, some statistics shows that most, and I forgot the percentage, but most small business, when they suffer a major attack, they are out of business in 6 months.
Wow.
Right. And that is what we want to prevent. We want to help those organizations, number one, not to have an attack. And if they do, right, there is a saying in the security business that says, if a company, there's two types of companies in America, the ones that have been hacked and the ones that don't know yet they have been hacked.
Yeah.
And so most organizations are, targets. Not however small they are, they're still a target. But I feel good when I see that we contributed to keeping these organizations stronger and safer.
No, it feels really good to be on the good side and helping companies get on with their mission and not have to worry so much about potential issues. I actually just got a letter from my university saying that the Alumni Association database had been breached, and these are the types of information that were out there. They had decided to pay the ransom. Actually, they were breached and were held ransom in terms of if they didn't pay the ransom, the attackers were going to release the data or sell the data on the dark web. They paid the ransom, and now they've been monitoring the dark web to see if any of the compromised data has actually been released or is being sold. And so far, to date, according to them, it hasn't. But it's kind of scary, And if you can help these organizations or these small businesses to protect their data, protect their customers, that's a great thing. And one other thing is, compliance can be so complicated and hard to get your mind around, because some organizations have to deal with GDPR and potentially HIPAA and the California version of the California Data Privacy Act, or a variety, a myriad. I mean, in Brazil, you have a version of GDPR. China has a version of GDPR, right? And I think one of the things that Microsoft has done is with their compliance manager is to basically bring all of those regulations into one dashboard and then monitor your tenant and show you where you're at. And I mean, are you seeing companies use that?
Yes, more and more, right? And and that's one great example of what I meant with, Microsoft commitment to support organizations with compliance, right? And security and compliance. Yes, more and more organizations are embracing the compliance manager. The good thing is, for all customers that already have Office 365 subscription, they already have compliance manager, right? There's no additional cost to them. What they might need help with, right, is help with orientation and a strategy to maintain compliance and monitor, right, actions around becoming compliant, and that's what compliance manager is there for, right? And a lot of our customers that we engage exactly with that purpose to build up a plan and set up a path, of increased compliance with whatever regulation they might be looking for being compliant with.
Well, that in a combination with the network scan you described earlier, and many of the other services that adaQuest offers, definitely are valuable. And obviously, I mean, judging by the growth of your business, are being well received in the market. So, Hiram, hey, it's been great talking to you, and look forward to having you on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
You take care.
Thank you. Anytime.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.